Welcome to Xcelerate with Sean Redford. The Xcelerate Xcast is designed to provide Experior agents with simple, repeatable, and profitable strategies for you to grow your business. We will share ideas on how to identify ideal target markets and new opportunities, improve your conversations with proven scripts and storytelling, and finally, we'll also meet with industry experts and our partner companies to ensure we're up to date with the newest technology and insights, all so you're able to accelerate your growth. We hope you enjoy Xcelerate with me, your host, Sean Redford. Today we'll be speaking with Vanessa Scott, National Living Benefits Consultant with Manulife Financial. They say your health is your wealth, and Vanessa believes that. Today we will be talking about Synergy, a unique product from Manulife that incorporates life, critical illness, and disability insurance all in one. And who better to talk to about it than Vanessa Scott? Her passion is to take her practical and technical expertise and translate this into effective and workable sales strategies that are easy to digest. She specializes in taking the sting out of having living benefit conversations. She's well known for sharing her unique yet simple, effective sales language and ideas. She believes we can have these important discussions with clients without confusing them or ourselves. So let's have a conversation with Vanessa. And that's an interesting thing with financial services products in general. You're always asking somebody to sacrifice something today in terms of their dollars, whether it's investment dollars or premium dollars, for something that they may or may not realize in the future. And our brains can't process that, right? We can't think and enjoy something in the future, but that's basically what we're asking them to do. So I love your point there about the fact that you've seen people deal with these, and both on a financial and emotional level, the impact on their lives. And to your point, the people that are living paycheck to paycheck, I mean, even six-figure income earners are living paycheck to paycheck. And if they were to lose that paycheck for 3 months, 3 weeks even, it could be the difference between losing their home or not. So, I mean, when is the right time to talk about critical illness insurance? When should an advisor, an agent be bringing this up with their clients?
I'm going to suggest right from the get-go. And I don't mean launching in your very first meeting with a client to the details of how every critical illness policy works in Canada. That doesn't work. But I think if we take a holistic look at financial planning, and the good and bad of our industry is there's so much to know that sometimes we want to share it all with a client, which can be overwhelming. It's drinking from the fire hose. So I like to really boil things down and be a little more simple. And being simple is not being disparaging to a client who's very high in their profession or anything else. It's just making it chewable, easy. So I think about there's really three risks, right? There's living too long, dying too soon, and becoming incapacitated along the way. And incapacitated along the way is where I've chosen to specialize, is in living benefits. So what happens if there's a major failure of health? And I actually like to use the words major failure of health rather than say critical illness insurance. And again, we're not being deceptive. We don't call it death insurance, even though that's what it is. We put in a little bit of a nicer wrapper on it. So when I think about major failure of health, that way I'm not necessarily saying cancer. And if cancer is not something that is fearful to you, which realistically for most Canadians it is, but if you go too far down and you start to talk about MS as one of the covered conditions, which it is in Canada, and your client has never had or known anyone with MS, then your conversations really don't land. Where if I say major failure of health, and I'm actually going to suggest that as an advisor, you can say that 4 or 5 times with a client and then stop. So say it once, one more than feels comfortable to you, and then stop and say, Sean, when I say major failure of health, what are you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And then your client will tell you the item that they are concerned about or that they fear. And I'm not a huge fan of trying to push our finger into that fear button, but we need the client's motivation to move forward, to do something about it.
Absolutely. I mean, people buy based on their emotions. You've got to trigger those emotions, and they don't know what to feel or what to be concerned about until you bring it to their attention, because their minds are working so fast about dealing with everything. They got to get Billy and Susie off to camp soon, or they've got to be making lunches for the next day, or whatever it is. They don't have time to stop and think about, well, I guess what we're talking about here are the risks, whether it's the risk of dying too soon, living too long, or becoming incapacitated, saving enough for retirement. These are things people just don't usually set the time to think about, which is one of the values of dealing with a professional advisor or professional agent themselves, is that it just forces them to make some time
Yep.
for that thought, right? Um, that's great. I mean, you've worked with lots of agents all across the country. What are some of the best ways that you've learned to open up the conversation? Like you've talked about, do it soon and early,
Mhm.
but maybe the agent has been in the business for a number of years. They've had the client for a number of years. How do they open up the conversation when they've never done it before?
Yeah. Well, I think if you have an existing client, you could certainly reference, I was just in a session, I was just in a seminar, this was brought to my attention, it's new. Or you can also just go back and there's the idea of the Monday morning phone call, which is not a new concept, but it's a great little one to share with a client. So the conversation would go something like, Shawn, we've been busy building your financial strategy. We have some life insurance in place. We have some disability. We have some investments. Again, congratulate your client for everything that we have done so far. And then say, what we need to do now is pause and protect it because we've been busy building. Now we just need to make sure that everything we're doing comes to fruition. Or you could have the Monday morning phone call. The Monday morning phone call goes something along the lines of, we've been busy building your financial strategy, but I'm a little uncomfortable. Really powerful words for you to say in front of a client. And it's sometimes tough to say those words, but I'm uncomfortable because if you were to call me on Monday morning and tell me that you had this kind of a diagnosis on the weekend, cancer, stroke, or heart attack, pick the most common three reasons why we see claims. I don't have a good answer for you yet. We don't have anything in place that would help you in that moment if you survive.
Hmm. Yeah. You've brought up two great points there. The first was when you remind them of the work, the effort that they've put into creating their financial security, to investing in themselves. I think that's so valuable, but I also think it's so important for the advisor to remind the client of the value that they've brought. None of this would have happened without the help of the agent, right? None of it. And you don't want to come out and say it, but by reminding them of all of the things, all of the steps that you've taken, all of the measures that you've put in place, all the processes, all everything, it's a good way to remind them of the value that you've brought along the way to get them to that point.
Mhm.
And then the second point you were talking about was, you know, busy building your wealth. And I've used the line in the past where I've said, if I do my job, I'm managing the risk to get you from point A to point B. Okay, that's my job, is to make sure you're on track, to talk you off the ledge every once in a while when the market's crashing and you want to sell, sell, sell. Or I'm calling you saying, you know what, now's a good time to buy. We should maybe increase your contributions. That's my job, okay, is to be there, that guide for you. Your job is to listen, to ask questions, to make sure that you're comfortable with what we're doing, and to do what you say, which means contributing those dollars. The one thing that neither of us can control is your health.
Mhm.
In some instances, is health incidents that kind of derail the plan. So I think it's really important that today we talk about some of the ways, circumstances, tools that we have at our disposal to protect that risk, to protect against that risk. Same idea. You're
Yeah.
building, we've spent all this time doing this, and if I do a good job and you do a good job, great. But what if? And I think you used that in a previous conversation that you and I have had, is the what if, or the if
Mhm.
statement. Is that true? Is that
Yep.
correct? Do you want to share that with us?
Sure. I'm a huge fan of sometimes uncomfortable silences and the tough question. Because again, I think that the advisory role is that of a guide, is that of a quarterback. So, and unfortunately, we have to think about the if. So I asked the question about what if this would happen? Is it possible? Well, you know, everyone likes to believe that it will be someone else, but we know that statistically it could happen to us. So then put the client in that somewhat uncomfortable position and say, okay, if it were to happen tomorrow, then what?
Mhm.
And the hardest part for myself, likely from some of the advisors, is to maybe stay quiet, let it
Mhm.
sit and marinate for a moment, maybe even repeat it. And if a client is truly stuck, then maybe guide them. So, okay, what have we got in the bank? Right? How long can we pay the mortgage or the rent or the groceries? And then what have we got invested? And if we pulled that out, what we would end up with after we had taxes? And
Yeah.
is there life insurance that has cash values that we could borrow from or raid? But again, it's that what if? And I sometimes talk about the fun stuff, right? The last time you took a week's vacation or 2 weeks vacation or even 3 weeks vacation, how much work did you have to do in order to be prepared for that fun, wonderful event?
Mhm.
Well, this is an unfun event that you don't get to be prepared for. So you're just in it the next day. So I'm a big fan of the if. It's a little
I love it.
uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but
But that's again, that's our job. It's our
it is.
responsibility to have these uncomfortable conversations, to talk about the risk of a child dying, to talk about the possibility of you not having enough for retirement. Like, what does this look like to you? That's our job. So I think it's so important to remind the clients that, we are going to have some uncomfortable conversations, but that's so that the uncomfortable circumstances aren't as bad when they occur.
You know what? You hit it exactly where I was going to say. I always say I'd rather have an uncomfortable conversation than an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's the lesser of two evils, really.
Absolutely. So, on that note, Manulife has done a great job with promoting critical illness insurance over the years. I personally attended a training program 20 odd years ago on how to sell critical illness insurance. And before 20 years ago, I thought we did a horrible job as an industry teaching advisors and insurance agents how to sell critical illness insurance, how to open up the conversation. And I think we've learned a lot over this period of
Yeah.
time, and having resources like yourself certainly have made it easier. What about Manulife in terms of the product offering? I mean, does it have any, has Manulife done anything that's unique or added anything that really stands out in the marketplace that you think our agents should be aware of?
We have, and it's something I'm incredibly proud of. And often when advisors and clients really understand it, they go, well, why would I choose someone else? Now, again, let me put my money where my mouth is and explain that. So in every Manulife plan, so I'm talking about Life Check, whether it's term 10 and it's an 18-year-old, whether it's term 20 and it's a 33-year-old, whether it's coverage to 65, where the client is only worried about getting to that magical retirement date, whether it's coverage to 75, where the client says 65 is way too young for me, I've got to work a couple of extra years, or the client who wants permanent coverage. Every single one of those clients, when they buy Life Check, they have the full suite of critical illness that includes partial payments, but they also have long-term care. It's not a conversion option. It's kind of the back seat of the car. And I use a lot of analogies. You either love them or hate them. But I think of when you're buying a vehicle, you typically don't buy the vehicle for the back seat. But if you need the back seat, it's really important to have one that is comfortable. So every single one of our contracts includes long-term care. So the 18-year-old probably doesn't care unless they're more into some extreme sports and they're worried
Mhm.
about, downhill skiing in that tree. The 33-year-old maybe doesn't care unless they've seen it maybe a little bit with mom and dad's failing health. But the clients in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, and their 60s, because we issue coverage right up to 65, love the idea of two for one. Two coverages, one policy. And quite honestly, Canadians love the idea of two for one too. We are all
Mhm.
looking for the way to stretch our budget dollars. And long term care is harder to buy on a standalone basis in Canada anymore. So it's a way of getting both because you never know what's going to happen in the future.
So, how does your long term care benefit work? Because a lot of carriers in their critical illness insurance policies say they offer long term care. How is yours different?
Yeah, so in the industry, and I'm going to talk about standardized definitions, some of the other carriers have loss of independence. Now, loss of independence and long-term care sound very similar because they're activated when a client can't do 2 out of 6 activities of daily living. And I will give you a little cheat in a moment on how to remember those and explain them easily to a client. So both situations would trigger when you can't do 2 out of 6. The challenge is loss of independence has an extra caveat. It says the condition must be permanent and non-recoverable. And that's kind of a high bench mark to hit. At Manulife, we don't have that benchmark. There's no requirement of permanence. It could be a short-term item. Now, the difference is loss of independence is a lump sum payment. Lump sums are more attractive than monthly. Ours are a monthly payment, 1% of your total if you're getting care at home, 2% of your total if you're getting care in a facility, and the client gets to decide where they're getting care. And that is part of the pool. So that would overall diminish the overall policy. But because it doesn't have that word permanent in it, things like car accidents, where someone is broken, maybe has an 18 months or a 2-year recovery and 6 surgeries, that's coverable. Where that's not necessarily a permanent non-recoverable, it's a messy journey, it's a long journey, it's uncomfortable, but it's not permanent. And you need the word permanent non-recoverable in order to trigger the loss of independence.
That's very much a key distinction. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you did bring up partial payouts, like early payouts for certain ailments. Does Manulife offer partial payments?
We do. Again, I'm proud to say we offer the biggest check in Canada. So we pay 25% up to a maximum of $50,000 for 6 covered conditions. That partial payout does not reduce the rest of the contract. So if someone had, for example, an angioplasty, which of course is blockage in the arteries, they get that cleaned out, but they still go in and have a heart attack later, they would actually get both payments.
Right.
It also doesn't come off a refund. So if you happen to be lucky, and I'm going to use these words in air quotes here, you're lucky you have early prostate cancer and that's your only issue that you've ever had, and later you decide to cancel your policy and you had that refund option on it, you would still get 100% of your dollars back. So you still got that extra payment for free. Again, you still had to have the cancer in order to get the payment. So it's never really a good news, but it doesn't come off the balance and it certainly doesn't come off any refunds.
Okay, excellent. What about for children? Do you have coverage for children as well?
We do. So we really have 2 options. We have a child rider that is attached to mom and dad's plan. What I really like about that is it covers childhood conditions. So things like Downs or CF or CP, conditions that children can be born with. And it's also a great solution because it's cost effective. It's one price regardless of the number of children. So you could literally have one premium for kitty CI and have 10 children, whether they be natural or adopted. That can also grow up into an adult plan when they're 21, or if there's a major life event before that. We also have a current pilot project where we're offering our full grown-up plan to 15, 16, and 17-year-olds.
What's the rationale for that market versus the kiddie plan that you've already got in place?
Because usually by 15, 16, 17, I start to call them mini adults. Some things like Downs, CFCP, things that cerebral palsy, sorry, I'm using the acronyms, things that are more childhood onset, typically under the age of 6 onset, really don't resonate as much with a 16-year-old, right? They're not in risk of having those diagnoses, where they're looking a little bit more for the full suite.
I see. Okay,
Mhm.
excellent. You know, I've always been a big proponent of the second opinion services, and I've found it a huge detriment that more agents don't promote the fact that this free service is included with these packages because it really does add to the whole recovery um, process. You know, it helps the client have peace of mind that they've got the right diagnosis, the right treatment, etc. What does Manulife offer in that regard?
Yeah, we use a service called Health Service Navigator. Now, this is very similar to Best Doctors, but it's a little bit wider. So what we do is there's 2 components. One is that there is what I call a scrubbed website. It's a website that a client can access that has Canadian information that's all been validated. So you don't get the Dr. Google effect where someone's dealing with a diagnosis and you get 3,000 hits and you have to figure out which ones are real and which ones are from a drug company, for example. The other part of that service, whether it is online or we have a call center as well, is it's not strictly related just to the items on a critical illness plan. So if you are traveling and you want to know what vaccinations you need to go to a certain country in Africa, we can assist you there. If you are looking for rheumatoid arthritis assistance, something that's not on a plan but might be related, or you have a child with autism, you can both access information and also speak to a medical professional and get guidance. We have people who get on drug trials. And then, of course, always built into that is, again, that same second opinion. Now, I say same second opinion. We actually work with major teaching and research hospitals. So if I said the Mayo Clinic, Sloan Kettering, UCLA, it's Boston, Massachusetts, Brigham and Young, again, major teaching and research hospitals. Instead of just looking at Best Doctor, which is, again, Best Doctors is a great service, when someone gets a second opinion through Health Service Navigator, their case actually is sat with a round table. And what you do is you get multi-doctors from multidisciplines. So it is not just one doctor who's giving a second opinion, it's a group of doctors. And sometimes you get maybe a different opinion, you get a nutritionist at the table as well as oncology, and you really sometimes get a wider and faster response. So our turnaround time for second opinion is 4 to 7 days. And I would suggest to you that when a client is dealing with major health issue, 4 to 7 days is probably too long in their experience. And at Best Doctors, it does tend to be a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think the norm is 2 to 3 weeks is usually what it takes to get a response. 4 to 7 days, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, before we got on this webinar today or webcast, you mentioned something that I'd not heard of with another critical illness benefit, and that was the recovery benefit. Can you explain for the audience what that means?
Sure, it's one of those hidden gems, kind of like that second opinion service. And the recovery benefit, again, is built into all of our plans. And basically, what that is it's an advance. So we know that in the last couple of years, critical illness plans have been updated, and you don't really have waiting or survival periods for most covered conditions anymore. It's been waived for everything except for cardiovascular conditions. But some of those conditions, by its very nature, have a built in waiting period. So, for example, deafness or blindness have 90 days, respectively.
Mm.
So we recognize that even during that time frame where the client is waiting to meet the definition of blind or deaf or whatever the situation might be based on the condition, that there might be some need for some cash. So what we want to do is we want to advance a client. Now, this is an advance. It does come off the final payment, but we advance our clients 10% to $10,000. So that could be a heart attack. It could be something like blindness or deafness that has a 90-day waiting period, or it could just be maybe, let's say, a claim that's going to take a little longer to adjudicate. Maybe it's a claim from another country in the world, because of course our coverages will cover you worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
But we're waiting for the final piece of medical information from another country, and it's taking time. Giving someone 10,000, 10% up to $10,000 isn't going to solve all of their problems, but it certainly puts $10,000 into their jeans. So they've
Sure.
got a little bit of that relief.
Yeah, it's bridging that gap. I mean, most people are buying critical illness insurance for what reasons? To top up the difference between their disability income and their actual income needs, or at least to cover their expenses at home, or to help them get care during their recovery. I mean, any number of reasons why, right? And that $10,000 over a course of 90 days can make a huge difference to somebody. So that's now what about, I know the agents are going to be asking this question if they were on the
Yeah,
line. They'd be saying, so what if it turns out I'm not suffering from deafness or whatever it happens to be? Do I have to pay the money back?
you don't. So when we advance these dollars, it does have to look to be a valid claim. So of course we do a little bit of a safeguard there and a check. But if we're wrong, you don't have to return the dollars. Nice and simple.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Sounds like great value. I mean, I think we can agree the industry, I was reading an article just this morning from LIMRA, based our marketing agency in North America, that talks about statistics and et cetera about our market, about our industry. And it said more than 50% of Americans today now don't have any life insurance, which is astounding
Mhm.
because it used to be a much smaller number, but it seems as though people are not getting the advice, unfortunately, that they need to be getting. They're not getting in front of agents to talk about what the risks are that are out there. And, partly shame on them, partly shame on us. Like, we need to do a better job at getting out there and spreading the good word. So I'm curious though, in the critical illness insurance space, I mean, it's bad enough with life insurance. With critical illness, even fewer people have critical illness insurance.
Mhm.
How do you recommend we increase those numbers? Aside from the obvious, just go talk to more people. What else
Yeah.
can we do to spread the word about the importance of these living benefits products, in particular critical illness insurance?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, you've already hit on one, right? We start the conversation. I would say not even just start the conversation, be persistent with the conversation. I often talk about the idea of going for a no, getting a no, which
Getting a
I
no.
think as advisors, we don't want no's from clients. We've been taught we just want yeses to move things forward. But if you never get a no, then you're not really done yet, right? So, and when I talk about being persistent, I can talk about the idea of critical illness. I mean, it's simple. Like some stuff is kind of straightforward, right? Put it on an agenda. If you put it on an agenda, and even if your meeting goes long or you get stuck on a point, the fact that it's there, someone will ask about it. And then, of course, the next time you see it, put it back on the agenda. Or if someone says to me, you know what, I'm not interested in this, that's no problem. I respect your decision. Shawn, would you mind if I asked you again next year? I just want to make sure you and your family are protected. And
Yeah,
again, the idea there is we've all looked at something, whatever decision it was, and it wasn't right in that moment. And then we learned later, turned around and looked at it again and went, oh, now it makes perfect sense. Now I want it. So sometimes it's a timing issue. I think too that some clients understand critical illness, right? So as we explain it, right, you get this lump sum payment if you're diagnosed. And I think there's sometimes the residents of it might be too expensive for me.
hmm,
So what I like to do is I like to show a client and I can show a spreadsheet, but you can do it on a piece of paper too. It doesn't have to be fancy, but just show 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, male and female, and show what $50 a month or $100 a month can purchase. And although you're not speaking directly to the client situation, right there, a 44-year-old male, it gives them the sense of, oh, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be because they see
yeah.
the value in it. But sometimes they don't want to talk about it or they put up the objection because they don't want to be embarrassed by it doesn't fit my budget today.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you said a couple good things there. First of all, ask again, even if they say no, ask their permission to bring it up again in the future because who knows, circumstances may change, awareness might change. Your sister being diagnosed with breast cancer might change your whole perspective
Mm-hmm.
on the importance and the value. Watching them suffer emotionally and financially through their recovery might change everything. So asking their permission in advance, I think that's a great idea, especially if they say no, because you don't want to ask if they say no, you look like a jerk. Um, but I think the other thing that you mentioned was bringing it up earlier on, and we all are required to have engagement letters or disclosure
Mm-hmm.
documents today, right? And if you say that you are a life insurance agent, a licensed life insurance agent, and you say in your disclosure there that you offer critical illness insurance, but yet you've never spoken about it, I'm not going to say, shame on you, but what a great opportunity to go back to that disclosure document and say to your client, listen, just want to run through this again, remind you of the value that I bring and the services that I offer, and more importantly, the risks that I'm here to protect you against. One of which we haven't had an opportunity to address yet. That is critical illness insurance. As you can see, it's on the disclosure document. I want to talk to you about that today. Back to your Monday morning phone call or just, re-engaging that client. I think it's so important to make sure that you're having these conversations. I mean, you've given us some easy ways to open up the conversation. I love scripts. I love strategies. I love the analogies. They've all been great. Is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up today with the audience?
I'm going to give you one more analogy.
Oh, I
So
love it.
again, I like to, I talked about the three risks a little bit earlier, but again, I use physical analogies sometimes. So I think that there's a lot of Canadians, a lot of our potential clients that are out there driving around vehicles. Now, those vehicles probably have an accelerator. That's retirement strategies. That's going to get you there. And there is your retirement dreams. And I think a lot of those clients have some breaks. Breaks are for when you stop, right? So that's life insurance. But I suspect that there's a lot of Canadians out there driving around with these financial vehicles without any safety equipment. They don't have seatbelts and they don't have airbags. Seatbelt is your disability coverage. That protects you whether you're going 2 or 200, whether you're at fault, the weather's at fault, or the person behind you is at fault. Your airbag is your critical illness. It only goes off in critical events. Now, in a serious situation, you want both of those safety mechanisms. But I suspect that most of us would not get in a vehicle today or put our loved ones in a vehicle unless it was a classic vehicle without those two safety elements.
Love it. Love it. Seatbelts and airbags. I hope
Mm-hmm.
everybody got that. Listen, Vanessa, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your insight. Again, we are focusing our efforts in spreading the word, spreading the gospel about the importance of critical illness insurance, disability insurance, and right now, ensuring the lives of children. That's the focus for the next 90 days. And you've been a huge, huge benefit to our advisors in opening up those conversations. So I just want to, again, thank you. Thank you, Manulife, for your incredible support. And hopefully to all of our agents, they've got some great scripts, some great ideas that they can hit the ground running. And their next Monday morning phone call will hopefully be to talk about life insurance, CI, and DI. So thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for watching Xcelerate. I have another great video right here, so check it out. And remember, Xperia Financial Group is about real people, real ownership, and real change. Let us help you accelerate your growth.